Welcome back to Giants.com. According to reports, the New York Giants have agreed to terms with two-time Super Bowl champion cornerback and New Jersey native Logan Ryan. The signing is contingent upon Ryan clearing COVID-19 protocols and passing a physical. John Schmelk, Lance Meadow with you. And Lance, this is a free agent name that a lot of people have talked about for much of the offseason, not regarding the Giants, but just in general. A very good player. It took him a while to find a team. But now, at least according to reports, he's going to become a member of the New York Football Giants.
Yeah, John, as you hit on, this is a veteran free agent who has the versatility to play both corner and safety. 7 years in the NFL. He's got connections to the New England Patriots with Patrick Graham and Joe Judge because he was there early in his career. And he's played for also a lot of veteran defensive coordinators. So he's been experienced in various schemes. And I think that will add a lot of experience to what is a very relatively young secondary right now for the Giants.
Yeah, played for the Titans last year. Before that, the New England Patriots. And let's start with the connections first. Obviously, he started his career up in New England lands. Patrick Graham, the Giants defensive coordinator, cut his teeth there on the defensive side of the ball. Then you have Joe Judge as well, who, of course, was a special teams coordinator and assistant special teams coach, becoming New York Giants head coach. So both those coaches very familiar with the type of person and player that Logan Ryan is.
And that helps because, John, the clock is ticking. Week 1 is around the corner, so if you could bring somebody in this late in the season who has some familiarity with the personnel as well as the staff, I think that's critical. Now, Patrick Graham, when he was in New England, John, in 2013 was the defensive line coach. 14 and 15 was the linebackers coach. So he wasn't Logan Ryan's positional coach, but he certainly had a say in the defense. He was invested in all the players, so there was that connection there. And as you mentioned, Joe Judge was on special teams. So the fact that he's been in Bill Belichick's system, and clearly Patrick Graham and Joe Judge are branches of the Belichick coaching tree, clearly has a very strong connection there to New England ties, as well as what they've run there and some of what they're carrying over to the Giants organization.
Yeah, if you take a look at how he's been used in the past, Lance, you can see how the Giants might use him. And the last few years, he has been used primarily as a slot cornerback, and that's a nickel cornerback, which means he's covering the inside receiver. So he can do that. He also had well over 100 snaps last year playing outside cornerback, over 200 snaps the year before. So he is capable of that. And Logan Ryan also made clear this offseason that he's capable of playing safety. He had a number of snaps in the box last year, only 22 snaps at free safety, but around the line of scrimmage. This is a very versatile player, Lance, and we've talked about it all offseason. This is a defense where Patrick Graham and Joe Judge want to be able to move pieces around and use guys in different ways based upon the opponent and who they're playing each week, and Logan Ryan's versatility will certainly allow them to do just that.
Well, the favorite term that we've brought up all offseason, John, is multiple. So I think it applies to Logan Ryan, as you just hit on. He had nearly 900 snaps in the slot, but to your point, he was utilized as a safety throughout the course of his career, not just last season. And, this is a player that also clearly has, I think, redefined himself over the course of his career. Because as you get to the later stages of your career and the talent that you're going up against gets younger and younger, you need to evolve as a player. And that's a big part of this Giants defense. So the fact that they could bring in a player, John, that could be moved around. Remember, you need 3 corners in today's NFL. You need 3 reliable starters. And also on top of that, remember, unfortunately, Xavier McKinney just got hurt. We don't know how long he's going to be out. So there's a need, and there's a need for a veteran safety, somebody that could come in and can make an immediate impact on this defense. So the versatility, I think, is valuable because if Patrick Graham wants to utilize him in the slot because of the youth there, he could put him there, but he could also utilize him as a safety who's both played by the line of scrimmage in the box as well as deep as a center fielder.
Yeah, and Lance, you mentioned it. You have the Xavier McKinney injury for one. Then previously, DeAndre Baker was put on the commissioner's exempt list. You have Sam Beal who opted out. So there was a loss and an absence at cornerback and safety, and the Giants have added a number of younger players to try to fill those roles. But as you get closer to the regular season, and as you said it, that first game against the Steelers, who, by the way, have some pretty good wide receivers and a darn good quarterback, a lot of experience right around the cornerback, adding a guy like Ryan must present some level of security, I think, to a defensive staff to know exactly what you're going to get out of a player. So Logan Ryan can fill those roles and really give the defense a boost here in the secondary where maybe you didn't quite know how all the pieces were going to fit in.
Well, and the other thing, John, is he could help groom this young secondary. Remember, there's a lot of guys in that room that have not had many NFL snaps. Logan Ryan, he's been there, he's done that. So I think that veteran voice is also going to be extremely beneficial to a very young secondary. As you pointed out, and I think this is important, if we get ahead of ourselves a little and we look at the week one opponent, he's got familiarity going against Ben Roethlisberger. That certainly doesn't hurt. He has experience going up against a lot of veteran quarterbacks. And as I mentioned off the top, I don't think it can be overlooked, John, that he's been working with a variety of coordinators throughout his career. It's not just the Belichick, Patrick Graham, Joe Judge connection. You mentioned he played for Tennessee. Well, think about this. Dick LeBeau was his first coordinator. Dick LeBeau, the longtime defensive coordinator of the Steelers, and then Dean Pease took over. Dean Pease is also somebody that was in New England. These are coordinators that have been well-versed, moved personnel around. The fact that he's been exposed to that, and if Patrick Graham does want to take a page out of some of those other playbooks, I think that bodes well that maybe you don't have to worry about how much you put on his plate, especially if you plan on getting him involved to a certain degree week one against the Steelers.
Yeah, no question about it. And I think you also take a look at his playoff experience. And obviously that's not relevant necessarily in week one, but a two-time Super Bowl champion for the Patriots. Obviously the Titans made that deep playoff run to the AFC Championship game last year. He knows what it means to play in big games. And in a secondary where the only veteran player, let's be honest, Lance, is James Bradbury. You know, Jabril Peppers is the other vet. He's only been in the league for – this is going to be his fourth season. He's only played 3 full years. So this is something that's going to help, as to your point, as a guy that can not only help groom and train and develop these younger guys, but more importantly, just somebody that understands the moment and understands what it means to play in big and important games, which, by the way, Monday Night Football, national TV, and the Steelers, that would certainly qualify.
Well, I think a guy that picked off Tom Brady in his final game as a New England Patriot, John, I think
final pass, right?
That's right, final pass. What it means to play on the big stage. He was the one that sealed that big win for Tennessee over New England in the postseason this past year. So to your point, it's well taken. He's been on the big stage. Remember, Tennessee went all the way to the AFC Championship game last year, in which they lost to Kansas City, and he was a big integral part of that because it's funny, Tennessee, well, maybe not funny, but at least it relates to the Giants in terms of having to have a lot of movable pieces. Tennessee was plagued by injuries in the secondary last year. Dean Pease had to move people around. Ryan was the consistent staple. The other thing, John, that's important to note that we haven't touched on yet, he is a really good tackler. You know what jumps out to me? His tackle numbers, and I'm not talking about total. I'm talking about solo tackles. He had over 70, just him alone. He's had multiple seasons where he's had at least 50. You want to know that you have a guy that could get out in the open field, not just cover, but could be in position to tackle. And as you mentioned, you now could say to yourself, if you're Patrick Graham, you have him and James Bradbury, you can maybe bring the other guys along a little bit slower where you don't have to throw them into a baptism by fire scenario, such as a Darnay Holmes who has the versatility to play inside, outside. Ryan now gives him a little bit more leeway to maybe not have to throw Holmes into the mix with X amount of snaps right out of the gates.
Yeah, it's a cliche, but, you know, the old term is that guy's just a football player, and that's the sense you get watching Logan Ryan play. And that's the type of player that I think Joe Judge and Patrick Graham, and I'm going to throw Thomas McGahee in the mix too because, you know, he has played special teams as well, but this isn't a guy that's just going to cover. He's going to tackle. He's going to do the little things. He's a smart player, and he's that type of all-around defender that I think really fits with what the Giants are trying to do, can replace some of that versatility they will lose for an undetermined period of time with Xavier McKinney, and just should make the defense better, which at this point of the year, if you can still do that in August, bringing in a free agent, it's a big win.
100%. Listen, veteran experience is going to be critical, especially in a season where, John, we've said this multiple times on various Giants programs, no OTAs, Zoom meetings all spring, and limited opportunities in training camp. So the veteran teams certainly have an advantage. But when you think about what the Giants have done over the last few weeks in camp, you bring back Marcus Golden. Okay, so, John, now you have an extra veteran presence up front, somebody that also was with the organization last season. Now you're bringing in somebody on the back end of the defense who has a similar resume, who's been around the league, who is a veteran, who also understands what it takes to prepare for opponents and make adjustments and changes. Remember, with a very small sample size of prep time, once training camp ends, the more veterans you have on the team that understand week in and week out what it takes to get ready for a game will only help the younger nucleus of this team right now.
And then, Lance, finally, now it's crash course time. With all the protocols that have to take place, odds are he's not going to go through a full practice with the Giants. So the question is that, can you get him ready, not only mentally but physically, to play a big role from a snap perspective in that game against Pittsburgh? Because he's not going to have any training camp. He'll have game week to get ready. But, remember, they did a whole ramp-up period on purpose, right? So guys could physically be ready to play. He would have missed all that. Obviously, he's a veteran. He knows how to stay in shape. I'm sure he was doing a lot of stuff at home on the side. But now it's the crash course to make sure he's ready to go in week 1 to help the Giants beat the Steelers.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, John. I'm sure as a veteran, he's been doing a lot of work on his own, maybe working with a trainer and so forth, because I think somebody like Logan Ryan was anticipating eventually the phone's going to ring and eventually somebody's going to need my services. And it so happened that it comes with a team that, by the way, is in his backyard. He's a New Jersey native, which is another thing we should add. So there's at least familiarity to the neighborhood that is going to help him. But as far as getting back to your point about, yeah, it's going to be a very quick turnaround, but it goes back to what you and I talked about earlier. He was with Patrick Graham. He was with Joe Judge. And while this is not the same exact system, and Patrick Graham is his own man, I'm sure there's some bells and whistles that are somewhat connected to the New England philosophy. And once again, Dean Pease, who was the defensive coordinator for Tennessee each of the last 2 seasons, was also in New England there. So I'm sure he's taken some of what he ran in New England, brought it over to Tennessee. So the basic concepts, I think, is going to allow him to catch on relatively quickly. And what did Joe Judge talk about? More often than not over the last few weeks, John, they have to fit the scheme to the strengths of the player, right? You don't just take a player and all of a sudden plug him in. I think that's going to be in play now that you bring Logan Ryan in. Okay, what does Logan Ryan do well? How much can he handle in week 1? And then we'll slowly build it up moving forward.
Lance, good stuff. Logan Ryan, according to reports, coming home to New Jersey, Rutgers grad, Berlin, New Jersey native, Eastern Regional High School, coming back to New Jersey, according to reports, to join the football Giants pending COVID-19 protocols and passing a physical. For Lance Benoit, I'm John Schmuck. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time, everybody.